Hey guys, I'm Eric.
And I'm Dan.
And you are on the 815 LSx Talk podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to our first episode here on the 815 LSx Talk podcast. Since this is our first episode, we thought we'd give you an introduction to us, who we are, talk about what our vision is for this podcast, talk about our current projects, and then anything else that comes up along the way. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So with our vision for this podcast, we wanted a place where we could talk about our LS projects, interview other automotive enthusiasts or other car YouTubers, and talk about anything that's pretty much automotive related. So that can be a TV show, another YouTube channel, or really whatever comes to mind. But just wanted a place where we can keep it interesting and enjoyable for our listeners, and then also have fun while doing it. So at any time, if you guys have questions or discussion topics for us, or even want to be a guest on the show, you can send us an email at 815LSx-Swaps@gmail.com, and I'll put that link in the description below. So who are we? Well, Dan and I make up 815 LSx Swaps, and we are located out of Northern Illinois. We're currently on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at 815 LSx Swaps. And between the two of us, we currently have 3 LS swap cars that we're all going to talk about. But first, we'll talk about how we even got into creating our social media accounts and got all this started. So when the pandemic hit, I kind of spent a lot of time working from home, and my kids were always on YouTube, and I never really understood their obsession with it. But during quarantine, I started watching a few YouTube channels. So prior to quarantine, I never really spent much time on YouTube other than watching how-to videos or learning how to do something that I didn't know how to do before, but not really so much for entertainment purposes. But during quarantine, I started watching some of the bigger channels, kind of like Cletus, and that's when I realized there's actually a lot of cool stuff on YouTube. So while this is all going on, one of my buddies, Corey at Twisted Tech, who hopefully we'll have on for an interview on one of our later episodes, started building a car that kind of got the attention of a lot of people. So he had picked up a C6 Corvette that had a blown LS engine in it, and the price of a replacement LS3 was pretty pricey. He had a Honda K-Series engine sitting in his garage, so he got this crazy idea to let's do a turbo 4-cylinder swap in this C6 Corvette. Well, that started getting attention by a lot of big companies like 1320 and Hoonigan, and I kind of mentioned to him, there's nothing tying this car to you, so you should probably start a social media channel for this page, or a social media page for your car. That way the credit gets back to you. And he mentioned he didn't have time really to run any of this stuff, so I volunteered to set up a Facebook account and a YouTube channel. So I was helping him run these, and he was putting out some videos, and it seemed like a lot of fun. So the problem is the cars that I have didn't really fit the following that he was building. So I was building LS cars, and he had following of people that were taking LS out of cars and putting in kind of crazy swaps. So I thought I might go ahead and start my own channel. So I messaged Corey and the other guys that were helping with the channel and said, hey, I'm going to start my own channel and just kind of see how it goes. And that's when I started 815 LSx Swaps on Facebook and YouTube, and then came Instagram and later TikTok. So I started sharing some of my projects, and Dan here is actually my neighbor who was building one of his own LS swap cars. So I thought, let's share some of his content and not just keep it about my cars. Let's get the community involved in other LS swaps. So I asked him about sharing his stuff, and he agreed, and A little bit later down the line, I asked if he wanted to help me even run these accounts, so that way he could answer questions on his swap and he could interact with our followers as well. So with that, let's bring Dan in here, and why don't you tell them a little bit about how we met and how you got started with your swap.
So I'm the other half of 815 here. My name's Dan. I've always kind of been into cars most of my life. Everything I've ever done is always kind of backyard mechanic, always kind of just do the work myself and figure out how to do it. My dad was a lot of inspiration going into that, and when he was in his 20s, he did a lot of work with race car engines, and he taught me a lot of how to work on my own car and how to be kind of self-sufficient. So I've always kind of had a knack for wanting to work with cars, but I've never done anything in the scope of swapping an entire engine, let alone just even rebuilding an engine. So when I moved into this neighborhood, I met Eric, and one of the things that got us talking was his LSx Swapped Nissan, and I thought it was, at this point I've already wanted to do an engine build. I wanted to find an old engine that needed to be refurbed, and just to get the knowledge of how to do it. So this was just the excuse I needed to actually start working on that. So I ended up finding a junkyard LS engine. I picked it up dead of winter in the middle of a polar vortex and got that thing home, and I just immediately started tearing it down, and with no prior knowledge of how to work on this engine, just, like I said, YouTube. Then that was what my relationship to YouTube was prior to this channel, is just find out how to do things on there, but also keep up with other creator content. But use that knowledge now to help build this engine. And from what everybody says is the timeline was super fast, and I did everything really crazy quick. But just how I get when I get into the mode of wanting to do something, I need instant gratification, so I just move through it really fast. So I spent about a year, I believe, getting the engine built about 6 months to rebuild the engine. And then once I found the car, and we actually ended up getting this BMW from Corey at Twisted Tech, he gave us a screaming deal on this one, so I couldn't walk away from it. And it wasn't what I wanted to build in the first place, but I'm actually really happy with getting it and getting this one built. And fast forward about a year later, things running, driving, and then this year I'm actually twin turbo the car and pretty much finished with that and ready to get it on the road.
So yeah, speaking of the BMW, we're actually sitting in your garage now, and it is sitting behind us, actually sitting completely on the ground.
Yep, it's still sad though, because it's not running and driving right at this moment, so I guess it's a sad car when it's off.
Well, the other problem is it is January in the Midwest, and we have a ton of snow outside, so I don't think you'd really want to take it out in all this salt right now anyways.
Yeah, it might ruin the patinaed finish it already has.
So do you want to tell them a little bit about what your engine combo is and what turbos and everything you got in there?
Yeah, so it is a 5.3 liter LM7 out of a 2000 Chevy Silverado. It's been fully rebuilt. Due to my own negligence, I would say, I ended up having to bore the cylinders over, so everything's completely fresh. It is a 30 over piston in there, so it's actually technically a 5.4, not a 5.3 liter now. It has a mild cam from Summit Racing. I believe it's their Vortec truck cam. And it's super mild, but it's enough to give it a nice little lope to it. And that's the way I ran it for the first year, was just NA with the mild cam on there, and I did all the tuning myself. And if you could see my air quotes, the tuning is something I've been learning to do and still working on. So over this last winter, it got garaged and we put it up on blocks and pulled everything out, and now I built a twin turbo kit on there. As with the engine, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, and this is just my first attempt at it, and so far it's running and driving, and I think it's good. But it has twin GT 3582s, which are your eBay Chinese turbos, 44 millimeter wastegates, and a 50 millimeter blow-off valve. And it's a 2-into-1 with 3-inch forward-facing headers into a 3-inch collector after the turbos, and then out.
So when you say built your own turbo kit, you literally mean we built, and I shouldn't say we because you did most of it, but built a complete hot side and everything.
Yep, every piece from the header forward was completely fabricated in this garage.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool to be able to see that come together in the short timeline. So you mentioned that this wasn't the vehicle that you were originally planning. What was it that you originally wanted to swap?
So, being that it is a BMW, it wasn't that it wasn't a BMW that I wanted. It was just not the right type of BMW that I originally wanted. My original plans were to do an all-wheel drive BMW X5 and do either a really large single turbo or twin turbos like I'm doing now, but in an SUV package. And to my knowledge, I've only seen a couple of them ever done, and I've never seen any of them turboed. So I thought, that would be a pretty fun project to start on. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition, but I'm pretty happy with what I ended up with.
Yeah, and mentioning a good deal on this car, I remember when I told you that Corey was selling it, I was trying to convince you really to buy it so that I didn't buy it because it was such a good deal.
Yeah, I kind of got that impression though.
So what all came with the car when we went and picked it up from Corey?
So I ended up getting this one with, it was a completely stripped interior. There was no interior wire harness. Most of the interior was actually out of the car when we went to go look at it. But it did come with a CX Racing swap kit for the LS, and that was the engine mounts, the trans mounts, a couple pieces for the coolant system, and long tube headers. But other than that, it was completely stripped out. This was a bare bones, I believe it was going to be a drift car, and it pretty much showed with that. But other than that, it was a very, very clean chassis. Almost virtually no rust, which is almost unheard of in this area. And it was such a clean car just to start this build with that it was really hard to walk away with what it came with and what he was asking for it.
Yeah, and this car was super clean because this car originally came from South Carolina. So you're right, there's not much rust on it at all. And it did have a LS in it prior to us picking it up. But they went ahead and sold that, and we didn't need that because you had your own engine that you had already started building.
Yep, and he had already, one of the big hurdles that when I started looking at this car, a lot of people are saying a 4L80E could not fit in a E36 BMW. And everywhere I looked, that was the same answer, everywhere. Well, Corey apparently figured out how to get that in there, so it also came with a cut drive shaft perfectly measured for a rear-wheel drive 80E mated to that engine. So that also took out a lot of the planning and extra work I would have needed to do to get it going because it was already there and ready.
And that was a bit of a hunt for us to find that 4L80E for a rear-wheel drive and not a four-wheel. You had talked about possibly doing a conversion, but really wanted to find a two-wheel drive one first. So you did end up finding one at the local junkyard, and it took a few attempts to get that pulled out.
Oh yeah, it didn't want to let go. It was at home in the truck it was in, and it didn't want to leave willingly. But I think it's much happier now. Since I did it by myself, it took me, I believe, 2 different days to get it out of there because I couldn't get one of the dowel pins to release from the motor, and I didn't want to crack the bell housing, considering I was having a really hard time at that moment finding a non-burnt up rear-wheel drive 80E. We did find a few others, but the fluid was completely smoked on them. And then the other 80E I do have is completely smoked that was on the back of your 6-liter. But like you said, that was a 4-wheel drive, and that would have taken a full rebuild and a rear-wheel drive conversion, which would have been a little bit more money. I was still willing to do it, but if I could find the rear-wheel drive, that's what I wanted.
So speaking of your transmission, you had some issues with your torque converter too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, so one of the biggest setbacks I had was forgetting to grab the torque converter when I grabbed that rear-wheel drive 80E. And I was so tired that day, I finally got that thing loose. I picked it up myself and I put it inside of a wheelbarrow, And I was just so happy I got it out that I just left, and I didn't realize till I got home that my torque converter was still sitting in the junkyard. Since we pulled that four-wheel drive 80E from the 6-liter, I still had a torque converter. So I ended up using that one, and it had a lot of burnt fluid in it, so I flushed it, and I went ahead and ran that one. And I was having a lot of issues the first few months that I got that car running, and I couldn't figure out why. The car was real hard to make power off the line, and it just felt like I was pulling a house behind me. And after doing some research on there, I looked around, and some people were saying that most likely the torque converter would be the problem. So I said, screw it. I went ahead and I talked to a local torque converter shop, Midwest Converters, here in Rockford, Illinois. And those guys are super helpful. They stayed on the phone with me for almost an hour one day, just talking back and forth about the car, the build, what it was doing, what I needed it to do, what my future plans were for it, so they could really customize what I needed to do for a torque converter. But they were on the same page that that torque converter was completely going to lock up all the time. And they were 100% right. Once I got it off there and brought it in, they did take it apart, and they cut it open for me right then and there, just to show me that there was going to be an issue with it, that the new torque converter I was getting was going to solve my problems. And sure enough, there were, everywhere the mounting pads were on the front of the torque converter, all 6 of them, there were stress cracks on the inside clutch face. And essentially the clutch plate was never disengaging on that, and it was always in lockup all the time. So when I would go to take off, the thing would be just trying to pull through the brakes. If I tried to do a brake stand on it, it would just push right through the brakes immediately. And I had to keep my idle RPM up pretty high just to keep it from stalling, which I thought it originally was an issue with the way I was tuning the cam, and because I've never done this before, so I thought it was something I was doing wrong. Turns out that it was a completely trash torque converter. So I really owe a lot to those guys for taking the time to help me figure out what was wrong with that, and they gave me an excellent deal on a new torque converter, and they customized this one to make sure that for the future plans of this car, that for mild boosts that I want to run in it, that this torque converter is going to be able to push the boost the way I need it to off the line and still give me a little more room for growth.
Yeah, shout out to Midwest Converters. They also rebuilt the torque converter that I have in the Foxbody as well. So with that, you had just about everything we needed, and then you ended up picking up a parts car, right, to get some of the missing pieces from what we got from Corey?
Yeah, so I was looking around, and I was having a really hard time trying to find all the control modules that I would need to get all the electronics working in the car again. And I was really looking for the interior wire harness that was already cut out of the car, because I really wanted something that I could street drive, not as much a full year-round daily driver, but through the nice warm months be able to almost like practically drive it to work every day if I wanted to. So I wanted as many of the creature comforts as possible. It wasn't a deal breaker. I could have manually wired a bunch of stuff up myself and had almost everything working, but I wanted as much factory options on this car to work as possible. So I set out to look for mainly the control modules and the interior wire harness. I stumbled across the 99 E36 that a kid was parting out. It was totaled out from a rear end collision, and it was already stripped out, no motor, no trans. He was parting out the car, and I got a hold of him and I asked him how much he wanted for a couple parts here and there and the wire harness. He shot me some prices. I said, okay, these work for me. So I went out and met with the kid, and I spent a while that day, and it was really hot out and kind of nasty, but I spent a little bit of that day trying to get the interior wire harness out. It was going to take a lot more time and effort than I had to put into it at the moment to get that wire harness out, but that was like what I really, really needed out of there. So I ended up cutting a deal with the kid. I told him I would give him a flat amount if he would let me take the car home, take whatever I needed out of it, and then I would either deliver it back to his house or I would deliver it to the junkyard of his choosing so he could get the rest of the money out of it, because his plans were to junk it after he got all the parts sold. He was okay with that. He was happy with that arrangement, so I went ahead and brought it home, and ended up gutting most of the parts out of the car, and especially the rims. I really, really wanted those. He wanted a bit more than I wanted to spend on them, but when we made the deal for the flat rate, he was okay to go ahead and let those go as long as I put my old rims on there. So I was happy to get those. But I was able to walk away with almost 100% of the car that I was missing after I got this. After we ended up dropping the car back off with him.
And not only the rims, you also got a black top too, right? So the original top was like a color matching dark green, and now you have a black top, which makes it look so much better.
Oh yeah, I was never a fan of that green top, and I was really looking for a way to change that eventually. I like the way these BMWs look. I don't know what they were thinking when they decided to color match the top like that. It did not look good, and I'm glad I got the black top. It does really make this thing look right.
Well, that's awesome. That's a lot of good information on the BMW. It definitely gets a lot of attention on our YouTube channel for the fact that you said there's not very many people that have done what you have done. There's a fair amount of LS swapped BMWs, but using the 4L80 and now doing a twin turbo build on it, I think that's really brought a lot of followers to our channel.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, is when I was looking at doing this work on here, even on message boards, not even just YouTube, but everywhere else, I couldn't seem to find anybody doing a twin turbo LS swap to these cars. And a lot of people said it just wouldn't fit. There's not enough room in the car to do this unless you did a rear mount turbo, and that brings its own problems into the mix. On YouTube itself, I've only found one other guy who's done a turbo LS swap to an E36, and it's a single turbo with the turbo up in the front bumper. That wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted a nice clean twin turbo looking car. Like, so when you pop the hood, it's an obvious twin turbo. It's an obvious turbo in the first place. But I've seen there's a couple other guys out there who have something similar to what I have. I've only seen them recently. But as far as I know, I am the only twin turbo E36 LS swap build on YouTube.
Yeah, and that's awesome. You've got a couple people that have messaged you asking questions that want to do a similar build, so it's awesome to be able to interact with our followers and be able to help them. We've got one guy who asks you questions, like I said, because he's doing a similar build, and we also had somebody else just reach out recently that is local to us that just purchased a BMW and is looking for us to give him a hand just doing an LS swap in that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm glad about, is we're able to work with other people in the community and help them out, because going into this, it seemed like anytime you had a question about how you need to do this or how you should do this, the answers weren't as helpful as much as they were telling you that it just can't be done, not why it can't be done, but that it just can't be done or it's stupid to do it. And I don't like seeing those answers. I like people who are going to be helpful, or if they say it can't be done, say why it can't be done and what obstacles I'm going to have to overcome to get it done. Because the whole point of these is to take what hasn't been done and make it done. So to tell other people that, no, that's just stupid, you should just go buy a car. Well, then why are you in these swap groups if you're telling people to go buy a car? That's not the point of this.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the reason why forums and group pages don't get that much activity, because a lot of these people don't really want to help other people out, and that's not what this is about. That's not what hot rodding is about. Hot rodding is about taking something and doing what you want to it, to customize it, to make it your own.
Yep, totally. And I'm all for the car community and people helping people, and that's what I want this to be. Is I want people to see that we're not 100% experts in this field. We've done a couple of these swaps, and we kind of know what we're going to head into starting another one. But a lot of this is we're learning as we go with a lot of this stuff, and we're trying to show people that even if you haven't done it before, don't be afraid of it. Try it. I mean, the worst you can do is try and fail, when most people don't even try at all.
Yep. So it's easy just to get out there, get your hands on it, and just start doing stuff. You're not going to break anything. So last question or comment on the BMW is, if you look at it, everything is pretty much stock except for your hood. So you've got a custom made intake right now on it that you might get rid of and put the stock hood back on.
Yeah, so originally, like I said, I was looking at trucks or an SUV at least to put this in. So when I built the engine, I had this entire engine running on an engine stand prior to even having a car for it. And like I said, it has a Vortec truck cam in it. So everything about this though is meant to go into a truck, and including the intake. So what I did with the intake is ended up shaving a truck intake and making it look really nice and pretty, and then painting it. And a lot of people like it, and a lot of people have given me compliments on it, or want me to do another one for them. And I'm happy with it, but it won't make the clearance for the hood. And as much as I like having that nice big intake on there, and it looks really cool, and truck intakes are known for making a lot of bottom end torque, I still would like to keep the exterior of the BMW almost as 100% stock as possible, because I really, really do enjoy the sleeper look of it. So I do want to go to an LS intake and be able to put the original hood back on. So that is in the future plans, possibly later this year.
That's awesome. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the couple of LS swap cars that I have. So the first one I built probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Don't have too much video of it on YouTube. I recently uploaded a kind of introduction to it, but it is a 1992 Nissan 240SX convertible with a Sylvia front clip. So it is a stock 5.3 with a T56 6-speed manual. For this swap, I used the full Siki Motorsports swap kit, which included the headers, drive shaft, motor and trans mounts, power steering lines, oil pan, clutch master, slave cylinder, and then the wiring specialties harness. The T56 I had to get rebuilt because I traded my complete engine swap that was in it before. So a little background there. When I bought the car, it had an RB20 engine in it, which is the engine out of Skyline out of Japan. And it was a cool motor, but it was really untuned. And to find somebody around here that could tune that was going to cost me quite a bit of money. And it was still on a factory ECU. So I decided that I was going to pull that out and sell that and then go with the LS swap. So I pulled the engine out, and I ended up trading a guy who was like 3-4 hours away. I can't remember exactly. But I traded him the entire swap, so engine, trans, wiring. That was a turbo engine, so the turbo and everything had a brand new stage 4 clutch in it. And I traded him everything for a T56 that came with clutch and flywheel and everything already. So once I got everything put back together, I realized that some of the gears were kind of hard to go in. I couldn't get it into reverse. So I ended up pulling it back out the second year of being LS swapped and took it to a local company in Sycamore, and he did a full stage 2 rebuild with Tick Performance parts and a factory LS7 clutch and flywheel. So it did cost me about $2,600 to do all that, but at this point the trans and everything is really set, and I shouldn't have to do anything to that for a while. But the prices of T56s are outrageous nowadays. People are asking $1,500, $2,000, even $2,500 for ones that may even need to be rebuilt. So there's a lot of pictures on our Facebook page of this build because, like I said, I didn't have the YouTube channel yet. So if you want to see pictures of that swap, you can head over to the 815 LSx Swaps Facebook page, and there's a whole album there of that swap. But overall, this is just a fun car to get in, drive around. I've done some autocross with it. I've attempted to do a little drifting, which if you see the YouTube video on it was more me spinning out than it was actually drifting. But it's just a fun car. I've taken it to the drag strip. We've taken the 240 and the BMW to multiple car shows around town. We've met a lot of cool people that just come up and chat with us, and it's just a fun car.
So that's actually the car that we ended up first talking when we first met, when I first moved in here, and it's kind of what got us together and actually talking about cars. So that actually has a little bit of history here. What are your plans on that eventually? I mean, I know you got the LS swap in there, you got the T56. What are anything that you want to do to improve it or make it faster?
Well, right now, I think we need to replace the valve seals in it because it is a 200,000 mile junkyard LS engine. It is a 5.3 that all we did was put new gaskets and seals on. So it does smoke a little bit like a standard junkyard LS. So that's one thing that I want to do. And I'm not 100% positive, but I would really, down the line, like to put an LSA blower on it. I don't know if the factory hood will fit or if I can find a hood to go over that, but I think an LSA supercharger on that would be awesome.
Oh yeah, that really set that thing off. And don't worry about the hood. I mean, a Sawzall and a pack of blades aren't that expensive, so.
We know that. That's we're not afraid to tear into stuff and make things work. So that's definitely the fun of doing all this.
Yeah, plus it just lightweight mods the car. It's all about more power.
So the other car that I have is one that it's been more recent, and that is a 1982 Ford Mustang Foxbody. So this car I also picked up from Corey at Twisted Tech. Kind of see a theme going here. But this car, when we picked it up, was nothing but a bare chassis. So no suspension. Interior was stripped. It had a tubed front end and a roll cage on it. And it took 3 or 4 of us to literally pick the car up off of his garage floor and put it up onto the trailer. So with that, this car is specifically built for drag racing, although I plan to do a little in-town driving, take it to work, stuff like that. But I knew that I had never built a drag car before. So when I got this, I thought this is my chance to, again, do something new. Just like when I got the 240, I had never done an LS swap. And it was just, I knew that when I got that car, that's what I wanted to do. And a few years later, I ended up doing it. So same thing again with the Mustang. I knew I wanted to build a drag car. I knew I wanted it to be LS, and I just went for it. So with that, I picked up a junkyard 6.0 that we pulled out of LKQ. When was that?
That was last year, or I'm sorry, not 2019, 4th of July.
And boy, was that an experience.
Oh yeah, I think I lost about 30 pounds in sweat that day.
It was 4th of July. It was so hot, but LKQ had their 40% off sale, so we knew we wanted to go pull it out. And when we got there, we found out that the motor actually had a turbo on it already, although the turbo was gone. So we just ripped in and got that pulled out, and it took us, what, 4 hours or so?
4 or 5 hours, yeah. I don't know. I lost track of time. I think it was heat stroke, not positive, but everything kind of was a blur the rest of that day.
Yeah, it was literally miserable pulling that motor, but it was worth it. I also have a spare 6.0 block that I had picked up from a coworker, and that had already been hot tanked. So my plan with that is to hold on to that and actually build that motor, because the stock 6.0 and the twin turbos that we're putting on this as well, GT45s, not too sure how long that'll hold up.
But we're going to be able to see how much boost that thing can take. Because, you know, when you don't care about the block, then it's more fun that way.
Yeah, that's right. So it's, like I said, it's a stock 6.0, has a Trailblazer SS intake and a 102 millimeter throttle body. Other than that, that is pretty much all that's done to it. We are in the process of building a hot side for that. Like I said, twin GT45 turbos. I know these eBay Chinese turbos get a lot of grief online, but I've never done it, and my thought is why don't we just do it and review it and find out for ourselves? Because if you look up online and ask, are GT45 turbos any good, you're going to get such a mix of results. You're going to get people that say, yeah, they work fine up to X amount of horsepower. You're going to get people that say they're trash, don't do it. You're going to get people saying all kinds of stuff. So the only way to find out is to go do it yourself.
So you say you're going to be putting the twin turbos on it, and we're going to actually be starting that project fairly soon. But you did get it running NA, and you did get it to the drag strip at least once last year. How'd that go?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, it started to get cold. We got snow early, and then all of a sudden it was about sunny and 60 one weekend. And the car was put together. We did the wiring harness from a factory Silverado harness. We got everything in, got everything running. It's a TH350 trans, which a lot of people aren't. A lot of people don't use the 350s, they use the 400s, but I got a deal on this that already came with a trans brake and a manual reverse valve body on it. So yeah, we got it going. We took it out to Byron, which is our local track, and had no clue what it was going to do, but all I knew is I wanted to make a pass in it and I wanted it to hold together. So I've actually only driven the car around our neighborhood a little bit, so this was going to be its first real test. And my thought was, we'll go out there and run like a 14, and if nothing breaks, I'll be happy. So lo and behold, the very first pass was a 1400.
Yeah, and you were able to make another pass in there even after that. So we were actually surprised it held together to the end of the track, especially since it was the first time that thing's ever been out of first gear, right?
Yep, and it was completely built in our garage, and we had no clue what was going to happen. So the night before, we found loose intake manifold bolts and a couple other things that we were tweaking and putting together the night before, and I was a little bit nervous going down that first time, but after that first pass, if you would have seen me on the return road, you would have thought that I ran a single digit. I was so excited just to be able to make it down and back with nothing breaking.
Yeah, I was almost positive we weren't even going to hit the drag strip that day because, like you said, a few days prior, we couldn't get the thing to run right. It wasn't idling properly. It was barely staying running. And we were able to find all the issues and get it all buttoned up that night before.
Yeah, so besides the loose intake manifold bolts, we found that 4 of the 8 spark plugs had been melted.
Yeah, the wires were completely burnt through and we weren't getting any spark to those cylinders.
So we swapped those out, made some loops in them so that they stayed off of the turbo headers, and just made a pass. So then the second pass we ran a 13.9, but we spun off the line. And we were in line to go a third time, and then what?
Yeah, then that guy blew up his motor halfway down the track and ruined the day for everybody. I can't believe that guy.
So we're not sure what it would have ran, but we are pretty sure that just NA, that we would have been into the low 13s had we got a little bit more time, seat time, a little bit more time on the tune. Still learning the trans brake, still learning basically how to launch, getting a good burnout, and then shift points are another thing. So if we would have had more time to work on all that, I think we would have definitely got down into the at least low 13s.
Yeah, if not high 12s. You were spinning pretty good off the line, had to let out of it quite a bit and then get back into it. And we still hadn't had the shift points quite right because the tach wasn't working, so you weren't sure where you were shifting at. So I think once we get all that nailed down, and you were leaving about 1,000 horsepower, or 1,000 RPM on the line each shift. So I'm almost positive we would have been in the mid 12s, mid high 12s.
Yeah, and just looking at that tune, you could really see where I shifted and how much it dropped off. So.
Oh yeah, I think once we get the twin turbos on there, that thing's going to be in the single digits.
Yeah, so we definitely have high hopes for that, and things obviously stayed together, so we know the chassis is good. So now we just got to get the twin turbos on and then take it back again next year.
Yeah, hopefully the BMW can join it.
And we've also met a few other people through the whole YouTube thing. So we met somebody with the channel Patina Pit Stop, and we want to do a collaboration with him this upcoming summer. So he has I don't remember what it was, a Chevelle wagon, I think, that he is building. So we're planning on doing a meetup with our cars and his car, and maybe do a little drag race in the summer.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
So my two cars are really a tale of two different stories. So the 240 was built with all swap parts, the Sicky swap kit, the wiring specialties harness, and no money was really spared on that build. Being that it was my first build, I wanted it to be really nice and reliable, which it is. And when we got the Mustang, it was, what kind of low budget build can we do with this? And that's another thing that we like to talk about with the YouTube channel is low budget builds. You can do this stuff yourself, and it doesn't cost a lot of money if you're willing to put in the work. So just like the wiring harness, I took the stock wiring harness, depinned it, got rid of all the wires I didn't need, and put it back in and made it run. Another cool thing that Dan and I have both done is we've really kept track of how much money we spent in these cars. So we each have an Excel spreadsheet showing what we have into them. So maybe in a future episode, we'll actually do a cost breakdown and go over what it costs to do an LS swap.
Yeah, as long as my wife's not listening.
Or my wife. And my last vehicle isn't LS swapped, but of course we wouldn't be 815 LSx Swaps if we didn't have an LS daily. I also have a 2007 Chevy Silverado 1500 that is my daily and tow vehicle. When we get Corey from Twisted Tech on here, we'll go into a little more detail on how I got that car and the crazy deal that I got on it. Recently we picked up another project for the channel, which should be debuting here on YouTube very soon. That is a 2004 Infiniti G35X sedan. So you might be thinking, how does this fit in with 815 LSx Swaps? So the idea with this is we are going to build a death cart.
Yeah, emphasis on the death.
So the car has already been started. It does not have a roof. It does not have hood, fenders, doors, any of that. So we need to get a cage in it so that the body stays supported, the chassis stays supported. And then it is all-wheel drive. It's a all-wheel drive V6, and we are going to see how much that engine can handle. And then of course when that engine does decide to retire, then we will do an LS swap and we will have an LS swapped death cart.
Yeah, so this one's been fully safety deleted, correct?
Correct. Nothing's been spared.
All right. I mean, that's more horsepower, right? Each safety delete, I think, is worth about 20 to 30 horsepower, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and each body panel that's been removed. So this is just going to be our fun car to really do whatever we want with. There's not much plan other than to build the cart. So we're still going to be looking for different ideas of what to do with it and what we're going to call it still. Well, Dan, you got anything else that we should talk about, or should we go ahead and get this first episode wrapped up?
I think we annoyed him long enough. Let's go ahead and wrap it up.
All right, guys. If you want to see our projects and follow our builds, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 815 LSx Swaps. And if you have any questions for us, discussion topics, or a guest in mind that you'd like to hear us talk to, send us an email at 815lsxswaps@gmail.com. And again, that link will be in the description below. Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, go ahead and follow along, subscribe to this podcast, and don't forget to subscribe to the rest of our social media, and we will see you next time.